People are still coming in, but I'm going to pass things over to Katie Malcolm as we get started today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jake. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our 2023 Teaching at UW Strategies for TAs live session. My name is Katie Malcolm. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Teaching and Learning. I'm also affiliate faculty in English. And as our name suggests, the Center for Teaching and Learning is an office that exists on campus to support teaching. So we work with faculty members, staff educators, graduate students to support teaching through resources like this session, through the Canvas site that we've developed, and also through some workshops and programs and resources that we have available to you throughout the year, which we'll be talking about shortly. This live session is just one component of our resources for you as new TAs at UW. These are designed to introduce you to some key teaching strategies and connect you to resources that can support you in your teaching here at UW. So we'll start off with some more quick introductions, and then we are going to hear from a panel of experienced TAs at UW, as well as a faculty member who works with many TAs at UW. So first, I'm thrilled to be joined by my colleagues at CTL. I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves and do some quick introductions, and then we'll dive into our session. And we're going to begin with a welcome from our director, Penelope Adams-Moon.
Hey everyone, as Katie shared, my name is Penelope Adams-Moon, and I have the great privilege of directing UW Center for Teaching and Learning. And I'm also Affiliate Associate Professor of History here at UW Seattle. I hope you all are as excited about the start of the new academic year as I am. This is always a time of new beginnings. Seeing new students, students enrolling in new classes, students encountering different instructors. And as TAs, you're involved in this newness. You're part of a new set of instructors that students will encounter, and you yourselves are encountering new courses and new responsibilities. TAs are the backbone, or part of the backbone of UW instruction, and it's just such an important role in higher education, and particularly at the University of Washington. As a TA, you have the ability to really make a difference in people's lives. And I know that many of you don't intend to go into teaching as a career, and you may be thinking that learning how to teach isn't really that important, or will only have value while you're here at the UW. But even if you don't go into teaching, the skills you can develop as a TA can help you learn how to move people. It can help you learn how to help people realize their potential and to help groups of people do things that they might not be able to do individually. And those are amazing skills. So I look forward to working with you as you embark on the experience of being a teaching assistant, and wish you the best today and throughout the academic year.
Thank you, Pen. I'd now like to quickly introduce my other wonderful CTL colleagues who I'll give a quick shout out to, and they can do a quick wave for all of you. So Wei Zhou.
Hey,
Mi
everyone.
Mihaila Jerka. Carolyn Levy, sorry, Carolyn. Will Darling. And last but certainly not least, Jake Hipsch, who has done all of the logistical coordination that has made today possible. So if you reach out to CTL Tech Support, you will be chatting with Jake. And now we would like to share a welcome from the Dean of the Graduate School, Joy Williamson-Lott. Joy was unable to join us synchronously today, but has recorded a video to make sure she could welcome all of you.
Okay, I'll be sharing the video in just a moment here. If I could have everyone do me a favor, you should be able to emote when I share this video. And if you would do me a favor and just emote when you can hear the video playing, that is just very helpful for me to make sure you can all hear it. So I'll be just joining in just a second here.
Hello all, I'm Joy Williamson-Lott, Dean of the Graduate School. I'm so sorry that I can't be there with you live, but I am glad that I get a chance to say hello. Welcome to the University of Washington. We are so glad to have you. You new Huskies join our graduate student community. You belong here, and there are people all over the university who will be working to ensure that you thrive here too. You have a special role to play at the university as teaching assistants. Teaching and learning are central to the university's mission, and graduate student instructors are what make that enterprise run. It's a new role for you, and it might be daunting. The good news is that you don't need to recreate the wheel or figure out everything on your own. The Center for Teaching and Learning has resources to support you. You'll learn about some of those resources in this session. I have actually used some of their resources myself, and I am a seasoned instructor. My point is that you shouldn't hesitate to reach out for help, support, or community. We and our students benefit from it. One piece of advice as you embark on this new adventure: practice compassion for yourself, for each other, and for your students. If you think back to your favorite instructors, you may not remember discrete material that you learned from the class, but you do remember how that instructor made you feel. What matters most to students is that you care that they learn and that you care about them. Compassion goes a long way. Good luck to you as you begin this new adventure. Go Huskies.
All right, many thanks to Joy. And now we want to give you all a chance to introduce yourselves. Obviously, there are too many of you here today to give you a chance to all unmute and say hello. So for right now, if you wouldn't mind writing in the chat, which you all should have access to, if you want to write a quick hello, tell us your name and your department, and let's see who's here with us in the Zoom room today. So we'll give you a chance to go ahead and write in the chat, introduce yourselves. See who we have here. Sociology, biochemistry, biology, ECE, see, fisheries, psychology, linguistics, biochemistry, history, so many, information science, cinema and media studies, rehab, civil engineering. This is great. It's so great to see all of you here. And as you can see represented in the chat, we in the Center for Teaching and Learning support TAs and instructors and faculty members from all across the university. We have over 80 departments represented here today. And that's why our resources are focused on really general teaching practices and strategies that apply across disciplines. So in your departments, you will learn more specifically about, say, facilitating that chemistry lab or grading that philosophy paper or teaching that introductory level Spanish class. What we will do in our session today and what we offer through our CTL resources is an opportunity to learn some foundational teaching practices that many faculty members and TAs at UW have found helpful for building effective classrooms, regardless of what they are teaching. And with that in mind, we're going to hear from a panel of TAs and our faculty member who works with TAs about effective practices that they've seen and used here at UW. We are so fortunate to be joined today by such stellar panelists, and they're going to share some words of wisdom and advice about teaching UW, and then also answer questions that you all have. So the way that this will work, we're going to give each of the panelists a chance to introduce themselves and share a few talking points. While the panelists are doing their introductions, we ask that you stay muted, and then after they all speak, they will open it up for questions. On a quick technical note, if you have questions while the panelists are speaking that you want to start to ask, please put these in the Zoom Q&A box, which you can find in the bottom of your Zoom window. If you can't find that Q&A icon, you might want to click on more or see the three dots and click on those to open up that Q&A box. From there, you'll also be able to upvote your favorite questions as well. So we'll use the Q&A function, not the Zoom chat for questions. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Anjali, who's going to start us off on the panel today.
Hi, everyone. I think we were going to all go around and just introduce ourselves first. So my name's Anjali. I'm a computer science master's student. I did my undergrad in math and computer science also at UW. I had the privilege of being a TA during my undergrad as well. So in total, I've been a TA for about 10 quarters and an instructor for a course for 4 quarters. I'm really excited to talk with you all today and share kind of some of my experience. I'll pass it off to Ryan to introduce himself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan. I'm in my 7th and final year in the PhD program at the Political Science Department. I've been a TA or instructor for at least one quarter, every quarter that I've been here. So I've TA'd well over a dozen courses. I've been the instructor of record for a handful of courses as well. I usually teach American politics and public policy courses sort of related to that. And last year, I was also the lead teaching assistant for the Political Science Department. So I designed and taught a course for new TAs in our department. And I think Kristen is next.
Thanks, Ryan. My name is Kristen Privatera Johnson. I am a 5th-year PhD student in the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences. I also did my master's in the same school here at UW. I've also been teaching since I was an undergrad. I was a peer TA, and I took some time off between a marine biology bachelor's degree and coming to the UW for graduate school to be a high school science teacher. And I've taught most of the years, including during my master's here, and I think it adds up to about 10 years if you lined them up back to back of being in the front of the classroom, the side of the classroom. And I'm really excited to share some tips and tricks for you so you start your journey here at the UW teaching. And I think that means Madeline's next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Straight. I'm starting my 3rd year in the biology department PhD program. And when I entered, I had done some tutoring and TA'd as like an undergraduate, like a course assistant, but I'd never really taught to a classroom of people. And I remember being really nervous, and I've learned so much in like the 2 years that I've been here in teaching. And it's honestly been part of probably one of the more rewarding experiences of my PhD program has been getting to share what I learn with students and get to see students like learn a lot throughout the quarter. Even though switching to the quarter system from a semester system was like a switch for me, it felt a lot shorter, but it's like you can still get a lot in. It's been an amazing experience so far. All right, Jose, I think you're last.
Good morning, folks. My name is Jose Guzman. I'm an associate teaching professor at the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences and the Marine Biology program. And I was a TA 500 years ago, or 600, I can't really remember. So that's okay. But I teach a lot of courses as a teaching faculty. And I teach a lot of the introductory courses, high enrollment. So I'm used to work with a lot of TAs and some upper level division courses, and even classes which are field courses. Like currently I'm at Friday Harbor Labs teaching a field course for 3 weeks. So plenty of experience in different settings, class sizes, and number of TAs.
Thank you, Jose. And now we'll give our panelists each a chance to share, to get the conversation started with by sharing some advice, words of wisdom with all of you.
Okay, so I think I'll get started. So as Katie mentioned, like each of us wanted to share something from our experience that we thought would be helpful to have heard when we were in your position. So when I was reflecting about what is the thing that I would want to share to folks the most if I was the first time that I ever TA'd, I think what I would have wanted to hear is that I think teaching is a skill that can be improved, just like playing a sport or like learning an instrument. I remember the first time that I ever taught section. I was 17. I was a freshman in my undergrad. I was really confident in the material, but I was not confident in teaching strategies and explaining and being comfortable in front of a large group of people. And as a result, my first course evaluations were an average of 3.5 out of 5. Now, that's not awful. It doesn't sound awful, but it was below average for the department. It wasn't something to write home about. I wasn't very happy with that evaluation, and it indicated to me that there were things that I wanted to improve in my teaching. I was luckily offered the opportunity to TA again, and I took it, but I told myself, like, if I'm going to do this, then I need to do better by my students this time. What did I do? Well, first of all, I spent a lot of time practicing teaching in order to improve any skill that requires practice. So before every section, I would do a dry run. I would record myself sometimes and watch it over and see what did I do that I liked, what did I do that I didn't like. I also requested feedback from a lot of other TAs and also from the course instructor. They're also a resource to you, and you can ask them for feedback as well. And I also spent a lot of time reflecting. So each section, I would think, what is one thing that I want to improve on for the next section? So for example, one week I wanted to focus on encouraging questions. So instead of asking, do you have any questions? I started asking, what questions do you have? And then pausing for like an unnatural amount of time. And inevitably, people will ask questions when you give them that opportunity. So like this, I practiced, I spent time reflecting, I figured out what is the thing that I want to improve in each section. And this past year, my course evals for the course that I taught averaged a 4.9 out of 5. So I'm really proud of that growth. I'm proud of myself for improving, and I'm glad that I can do right by my students that way. So I think the thought that I want to leave you all with for myself is that no one is necessarily born with the skills to teach. It's not necessarily something that's inherent. It's something that's fully within your power to improve. And so if you put in that time and that dedication to improving it, it's fully within everyone's power to do that. All right, I want to pass it off to Ryan to share the things that he had to say to you all.
Thanks, Anjali. I'm going to start with two things that sound potentially contradictory. And the first one is to cultivate authenticity in the classroom. And the second is to figure out your teaching persona. And so when you hear the word persona, that may sound like sort of putting on a false face. But what I mean by that is the sort of personality that you project in the classroom. The teacher is a universal archetype, meaning we all have sort of like images and ideas what comes to mind when we think about like the teacher figure. And we all model ourselves consciously or unconsciously on teachers we've had in the past and sort of draw on these kind of mental prototypes of a teacher when we're thinking about how we sort of present ourselves in the classroom. So I would encourage you to actually think about this consciously and try to figure out this sort of teaching persona that meshes best with your authentic self. This can be really helpful, I think, especially if you're feeling the way that Anjali described, feeling your first time stepping into the classroom, if you're feeling really nervous, or if you're having a bit of imposter syndrome, which we all do. So even if you're kind of naturally quiet or shy, you can develop a teaching presence that is true to your identity, but still projects an air of confidence and authority in the classroom. So this doesn't mean you have to be like a strict disciplinarian type or to be an authority in all things all the time. It just means embodying a type of classroom presence that really reflects your values and personality and aligns with the sort of mental models of the teacher. So as an example of this, in my first quarter of teaching, I tried to be this kind of like authoritative, like no nonsense type teacher. And it went terribly, honestly, because the style of teaching it just wasn't really authentic to me. So it was only after some kind of trial and error and reflection that I realized I'm really more of the sort of like supportive, nurturing type who genuinely cares about student success. So now I think about those things and kind of turn up aspects of my personality in the classroom to try to make myself more approachable, to demonstrate to students that I want them to succeed and that I'm invested in their learning. And so this can extend to how you carry yourself. If it helps you feel more confident, dress up a little bit, play the role of the teacher in your outfit. Like I usually wear, it sounds silly, but I like on the first day of class, I always wear a blazer and my glasses because it just sort of like helps me feel more like the teacher in the room. And so, thinking about those things that will sort of help you feel more like your authentic self, but also more like the teacher in the room can actually be really helpful. And there are small things you can do to help with this to sort of set you up as the teacher in the student's mind and the teacher in the classroom. But again, this only works if it is authentic to you. So think about those two things and try to balance those. And the very last thing I'll say is that you should also take advantage of the many resources at UW. As Anjali said, teaching is a skill. It's something that you can work on, and UW does an amazing job, especially the CTL, of providing tons of resources on their website. They do seminars, like you can ask TAs in your department. There's loads of resources at UW that can really help you to develop your teaching as well. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kristen.
Thanks, Ryan. So the advice I put together for you today is the first day of class, but it's a way to start the first day of class so that you have this thread to carry throughout the quarter with your teaching. And this applies whether you're a TA with a lab section and a large teaching team of TAs and a professor, or even if you're a pre-doctoral instructor and you're the one in charge of organizing things for all sections. And the very first thing I'd recommend is work with your students on the first day to develop something called a community agreement for your classroom interactions. Now, the CTL has a whole page on community agreements on their website, but I'll give you an example of how I do that on the first day to sort of bring you to the room. And so what I do is, after introducing myself and making sure everyone's in the right classroom for the right class, I ask folks to just take out a piece of scratch paper and think to themselves for about 2 minutes. Think about the last time you had a learning aha moment. You could even do this right now. When was the last time you were in some sort of learning environment and something finally just clicked in for you? What was going on in that moment? Pause. Who was in that room? What was going on in that room? What was going on with the people that were helping you learn, whether it be the students, instructors, TAs, or anything like that? After that individual time to think, I have the students pair up with the folks sitting around them, and I say, just share a little bit about your aha moments. And then we do a third part where we share out. So I might call on different of the partner groups and ask them to share what were similar or surprising characteristics of those learning aha moments that you shared. My subtle second piece of advice here is, since it's the first day of class, think about the learning technology that you're going to be using throughout the quarter. Maybe your professor is going to use Poll Everywhere during lecture, and you might use Poll Everywhere during lab, something like this. You can adapt this activity to use the same kind of technology or analog. You can use Post-it notes, this sort of thing. Mirror that so that the students not only are helping you learn about what this environment, this learning environment is going to look like, or what we'd like to bring and build together for that environment, but they're also practicing some of the techniques they'll use for the actual course content. Now, what do I mean by these community agreements? We've talked about what makes a good aha moment. Generally, from doing this, I found that there's about 4 consistent things we can learn from that. Respect our classroom community members and ourselves. I used to teach a lot of R programming, statistical programming courses. And in that space, it's often easy to make self-deprecating jokes about making a mistake. But instead, let's respect ourselves and our classmates and leave the self-deprecation to the side. That worked for me in my classroom. And to wrap up, listen with the intent to understand. So I'm always trying to practice not solving my students' problem before they finish asking me the question. And then I also ask for forgiveness, and I say, Anjali, I'm sorry. I started trying to solve your problem before you finished. Can you please walk me through that last part again so that I can actually help you with your problem? With that, communicate thoughtfully. I just role modeled that with Anjali. And the last thing is approach each class meeting with enthusiasm for hands-on learning and collaboration. So you might build in some extra things, especially if you have, say, a course where you're discussing sensitive topics, and you can find examples of that from your department. With that, I look forward to your questions at the end of this panel. But Madeline, please come online and tell us about your advice.
Hi, everyone. A few things I wanted to share was, I remember coming in, I'd been like at least 3 years where I hadn't been thinking about academic, hadn't been in the classroom setting, hadn't been thinking about biology in the most direct sense. And so I was nervous about what would happen if I was in this classroom setting and a student asked me a question that I just did not know the answer to, or on a day we're going over material that I was really unfamiliar with, or it had been a while since I had thought about it. And what I would do in this situation if a student just posed this question and I was like, I really don't know. And I think I've learned that it's important to say to students, I don't know, and to have that moment of being like, I don't know that, admit that, and then take them through the steps of how you approach the answer and how you go through answering that question. And that is often more valuable than actually having the answer ready, because by teaching them how you approach the question, you're teaching them how you learned that and how you think through that material. And often those are resources that are really valuable for students. I know sometimes I end up using I Googled something and I found this amazing other resource online somewhere. I will share that with students. This is a different perspective to think about the same question. And sometimes that'll help students click in a different way. And so being honest and upfront about not knowing shows that you are both a human too, and that you can approach answers and questions and find the solution, and that you're there for the students on that journey to get to that question. Another thing I've learned is I've taught some larger introductory classes where you're really given the material to teach and you don't have the opportunity to create the material. And then I've also taught some smaller sections where it's been the expectation that I was going to generate all of the material for that discussion section. And having taught both types of those classes, I realize it's really important to have a conversation with whoever's leading the course up front, whether that's the professor or another person teaching, and ask them what their expectations are and have a really honest conversation about that so that you're ready at the beginning to really meet them where they have their expectations. And often if you're TAing for a bigger class and it's your first time, there will be other TAs that you could either shadow or ask if they have advice about teaching the specific material, because they are resources there. Other people have taught a lot of these classes. The professor has taught the class. And so asking other people for help or for advice around specific things can be really helpful. And the last thing I would say is it's been the most rewarding experience is to actually give to the students and interact with them individually. And I've noticed the more that you put in and the more you engage with students, the more you get out and the more I enjoy going to every section and the more I learn from the students. And then I get to start to see their enthusiasm come through for the material. And so I've just noticed that the more I put in, the more I get out, and the more students also put in. And so seeing them match that enthusiasm has been a really amazing experience as well. All right, Jose, you want to finish this out here?
Yeah, I'll go. I guess my advice go through the lens of a faculty. I guess my number one advice for you folks is to first read thoroughly your contract as a TA and learn what is expected and what is not expected from you in terms of where if you have to teach labs, participate in class, lead problem sessions, all the above, how many hours of work you're supposed to put every week, and keep track of your hours of work, because it's very easy when you teach. It doesn't matter if you are first year TA or you are a 10-year track professor with 35 years of experience. Teaching is a black hole. And when you start prepping for a class, you can lose hours and hours and hours of work. Establish a very clear strategy to communicate with your instructor, because all the needs that you have can and for sure will change forward. So the best way that I do that with my TAs is we have 1-hour meetings every week. And it's a great time just to touch base on what your plan as a TA is for the week. Check with me if there's any change, and also tell me how you are doing, how you are feeling. And I know it's very tempting to schedule hours at the beginning of the quarter, and then things go peachy and you forget about those meetings, and then week 5, week 6 hit the calendar and you are, oh my God, what's going on here? We're way too far from the beginning, too far from the end. I'm slammed. I can't keep going in this direction. So keep those 1-hour meetings, if possible, active, and that clear way of communicating with your instructor from week 1 to week 10. And then for all of you that are about to graduate, that see graduation close, especially if you're looking for jobs in academia, in your application, they're going to ask you to include your teaching philosophy and very likely a DEI statement. Now is the time when you need to start reflecting on those things. Now is when think about strategies that can make your teaching more effective. How can you evaluate your teaching? How can you implement changes in your teaching? And how can you make your classroom a more equitable environment? I've been in a bunch of search committees lately, and people submit teaching philosophies and DI statement. These things are being generated ChatGPT without details of experiences. We want to see the things that you've been doing to make your teaching better, to make your classroom better. And actually, if you are in that realm, you're really in academia, you can start thinking on a small intervention that you want to change, things that you want to improve in the classroom. And if you are at that level, talk to your instructor, talk about small experiments or studies that you can do in your classroom. And the UW Teaching and Learning Symposium is a great opportunity for you to go and show your work. And with that, that's waiting for your questions, folks.
Thank you so much, Jose, and thank you to all of our panelists. We're now going to take some questions, and we'll start off by doing our questions that have the most upvotes in our Q&A. So let's see, the first one that has the most votes right now. Again, if you can't find the Q&A box, look under the 3 dots under more on the bottom of your Zoom bar, and you should be able to find it down there. So unsurprisingly, we have a question about AI and ChatGPT. We are really at an interesting time with this in higher education. But our top voted question is, it has changed. Well, let's do that. Let's get the ChatGPT question out of the way, because I think this is the one that's on a lot of people's minds. But do you all want to talk a little bit about any way that you have been thinking about using AI or ChatGPT in your work as TAs, or Jose, in your work in your teaching?
Should I go first? Okay, I'll go. For me, it's been a bittersweet tool, and it's at the beginning I felt rejection. It was like, oh my God, the students are going to use ChatGPT. What's going to happen now? All the assignments, but then I found that it can be a very useful tool. So it's not yet ChatGPT yes or no. It's not AI yes or no. It's how you use it and what is the context, right? So I tend to provide a structure that is harder for students to use ChatGPT in lower division courses when I want them to start grow that foundational knowledge. And so a lot of my assignments are sketches and summary sheets and flow charts and things that they had to do by hand. Not a lot of writing text, but a lot of visual things that so far ChatGPT cannot provide. And as we move to higher division courses, I started to use ChatGPT to improve text, to write the skeleton or research papers or research proposals, and then use it as a context to criticize ChatGPT. What are the pros and cons? But for that, I tried to use higher division courses when students have acquired that foundational knowledge rather than lower division 100, 200 courses. But again, it's not black or white, like nothing. It's just a lot depending on the context and what you want them to do, really.
Thanks, Jose. I'll give our panelists a moment to think if any of you want to answer this. While they're thinking, I do want to stress with all of you that as TAs, you don't have to figure this out on your own. Really talk with your supervising faculty members, talk with your departments. Again, because this is so new for all of us. Really, I know many different departments and faculty members are all kind of trying to figure out what makes the most sense for them with their courses. So Jose showed a strategy that works well in his class and his discipline. And you all can definitely rely on your faculty members and department coordinators to support you with this.
I think that's a really important point, Katie, for TAs. Like it's not on you to solve the ChatGPT problem. A lot of this has to do with the way that assignments are designed and sort of how susceptible they are. And that's ultimately the faculty member's responsibility. So like, ChatGPT is really good at doing summaries or things like that, but it's really bad at, producing original thoughts or analyses and things like that. So you can sort of, and Jose talked about strategies as well, like designing assignments that are sort of better protected from exploitation with ChatGPT, but ultimately it's not on you as a TA to solve that problem. I would say students are using it in my experience, and they're sort of curious. They're figuring out what it can do, as we all are right now. So I think being really upfront about sort of where the line is between using ChatGPT as a tool versus something that is crossing the boundary into academic dishonesty is an important conversation that you can have as a TA. And again, you don't have to have all the answers, but you can at least like address it head on.
Thank you, Ryan. We have so many good questions in here, so I want to make sure that we make space for those. Our next highest voted question is, can you talk more about getting students to take you seriously as an instructor, even if you are trying to be relatable?
I think I can jump in here. So I relate to this question. I'm young, I'm female. If you can't tell right now, but I'm 5'2". And so for a large part of my teaching career so far, students have actually often been older than me. And it's something that I grappled with a lot. I relate to the question. I don't necessarily have an answer for you. I also think about this to this day. But one thing I will say is, like, initially I used to try a lot of things to try to put myself in some position of authority, and use certain language or whatever to try to like feel like I was like more in charge of the classroom or something like that. And over time, I've actually stopped doing a lot of those things. Um, Honestly, I level with students. Like, I think part of being a TA that is cool is that you can be relatable. And so it's cool to them that like you might have recently taken this course, or that you have this kind of perspective that their instructor might not have. And so I think it's totally okay to like not try too hard to get them to view you a certain way or respect you, and to just be who you are. The fact that you know something about this material that they don't and that they're learning from is within itself a reason for them to be there and for them to pay attention. And so I think for the most part, students are respectful, and they want to learn. And so I think it's okay to just be authentic to who you are. That's my take, at least. That's what's been working for me.
Yeah, and I'll actually add, because I struggle to take myself seriously. And so as an instructor, it was hard to be like, oh, I'm a serious person. And I actually use humor a lot in the classroom. And so I'll often start off with like a funny story about like either the specimen or the study system that we're working with that week or something, to sort of make it a little bit lighter. But I think kind of what Anjali said is like, the fact that if you're there, you want them to learn and you respect them, they will reciprocate that respect, and they will respect you for being there and giving your time. And if you show that you care and that you're invested in them learning the material, I think that shows, and that the students then take that and return that respect. And you don't have to be super serious either, and you can be silly and kind of funny, but just respect them and respect their time, and be open with your resources and sharing with them. And I think honestly, it'll be easier than you think to get them to take you seriously.
I so agree. And I think from my experience, what has worked for me is doing things that build that relationship of trust with my students. And so I might recommend, when you have your meeting with the teaching team, like Jose has his 1-hour meetings, ask the folks that are in charge of designing the assignments, because a lot of times you'll be given the assignment already, or like the lesson plan to implement. Ask the teaching team, why was this designed this way? And when you get into the classroom with the students, what works for me is being a little bit transparent about why we're doing these activities. Full disclosure, I ask students to do group work all the time in my classrooms. When I'm a student in a classroom and I'm really tired from doing research and being in other classes, and someone asks me to start doing group work with people I don't know, my first reflex is to cringe, even though I know that helps students learn. And so what I am encouraging you to do is to have students take you seriously as an instructor. what has worked for me is just being honest. I think this works. There's evidence that supports that this type of activity works for helping you get to this part of your learning goal for this exam, whatever. Pick your level of zooming in for what you're focusing on, whether it's get through this assignment, get through the midterm, get through the whole course, get through graduate school. So yeah, it's about building trust. Being also, we've talked there, you can pick from all the wonderful advice the other panelists have given you. They've dropped lots of things about building trust, which is being authentic, like Ryan said. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know right now, but I'll help you find out, just like Madeline said. So good luck out there. This is a great question.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, I think we'll move on to our next question then, which is, have you ever TA'd a course that you did not take as a student? What was your approach and what were the challenges?
Yeah, I can answer this one. My very first quarter TA was a class that I had no familiarity with whatsoever, had not taken previously. And I think you will be surprised by how much of an advantage you have just by doing all of the course readings, going to all the lectures, and sort of like tuning in, paying attention. You know, if you're in a position of being a TA, it's because you have a history of being a good student. You're serious about academics, like, you know, just sort of like doing the work of the course and then thinking about it at a little bit of a higher level. You can even ask the faculty member, you know, sort of like for a higher level perspective on like the design of the course or things like that. But honestly, just doing the readings, going to lectures, and then just doing a bit of preparation, you know, thinking about which concepts were hard for you to understand is a great place to start in terms of like what you'll highlight, what you'll explain. But that will already just put you so far ahead most of the students that I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just make sure you're sort of like doing the work and keeping up with the course.
One thing I'll add to what Ryan said is I think that something that sometimes is overlooked is making sure that you know who the student body is of the course and tailoring your TAing, your explanations, etc., to who the students are. So sometimes that's evident in just like what number is the course. You can also ask the instructor, like, who are the people who usually take this course? What year are they? What experience do they have so far with this subject matter? One of the courses that I was involved in but never took was a workshop for discrete math. And it was specifically tailored to students that were first generation to college, were underrepresented, had very minimal experience with these kinds of topics. And so the experience of being a TA for that course was completely different from being the experience of TAing for the other core discrete math course. And so just learning who the students are, you can even ask them, you know, the first day, if you have some time where you have an activity, go around, talk to every single person, just get to know them. If the classroom is small enough for you to do that, I think that's also really important to make sure that you know who the students are and what background they're coming with.
Okay, I think we can move on to our next question. So our next question actually is a yes or no question. Are TAs at UW mandatory reporters? And we don't, since this is a yes or no question, if any of you have any insights on this that you want to share briefly, and we in CTL can follow up with some resources on this as well. We actually have some resources on this in our mental health Canvas module. But does anyone want to talk about this briefly?
I think the answer is yes. Y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're just talking about mandatory reporters as in terms of like reporting suspected child abuse, then I think the answer is yes, because we are Washington State employees.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Yep. Again, we have some resources on this as well in our mental health module. So go ahead and check that out if you haven't yet. So our next highest voted question is, what preparations do you go through before you teach a section in the classroom right before the students arrive and in the days and weeks before?
I can kick off with this one. I would say I'm a big PowerPoint person. Even if you're not actively going to present a PowerPoint, I will like make PowerPoint slides and then print them out in like a PDF version for myself. I think it's really helpful if you have come up with like a schedule or structure for that section that you're going to teach, and you print that out for yourself so that you can visually look at it and have like time chunks for what you expect or how long you want each activity to take. That can be really helpful when you're in the section and actually going through the activities to remind yourself that, oh, this was supposed to end at like 9:40 a.m. And I'm now 5 minutes past, I need to rush a little bit quicker. And so for me, it's been really helpful to actually think through what I wanted that section to look like, plan that out with like an outline, and really set up the times that I thought each of those activities would take, so that when I'm there, if I get a little frazzled or something, I can always return to that. And also think about like what would when I'm thinking about structuring, like what do I want the students to learn from this? And so I will really like focus around organizing the section around that, and really create a schedule for myself for that section. I think that's been really helpful for me in terms of planning.
I just want to quickly add, I do the exact same thing Madeline does. I add an additional column. Sorry, I'm a scientist. They turn into tables. There's the expected time to complete the activity, and then the next column is the realized time it took me to actually do the activity. And I think this works for me for two reasons. One, I have a track record of how long something actually took, so if I get the opportunity to do it again, it's there. But the second reason, and the most important reason to me, is a way for me to be more compassionate with myself. I'm acknowledging that sometimes I'm not going to meet my expected time. And there are plenty of valid reasons why. It's not a shortcoming of me. This is all about Anjali's advice about practicing becoming a teacher, right? And so what's one of the biggest reasons why I would want a dynamic time space like that is because not if I have a discussion section of 40 students or 30 students, they're going to be very different from the next section of 30 students. They're going to have different needs, different techniques are going to work for them. Some are going to talk more than others. Some are going to get it right away. Some are going to need a little bit more discussion time. So not meeting your target time is not a poor reflection of you. It's a very complex issue, and I recommend writing down how much time it actually took so that you can practice self-compassion and practice teaching.
My honest answer to this question is it depends on the week and how much else I have going on. And, you know, we are academic student employees, and it's just a reality that you have a lot of demands on your time, and it can be really hard to balance all of those things. And it's easy, especially if you enjoy teaching, to let teaching take up a ton of your time. And I would say, you know, that's sort of okay the first few quarters. You're learning, it takes more of your time to sort of prep for class and things like that. But you are going to need to sort of balance that with the other demands that you have on your time, right? So usually if I'm like going into the lectures or doing the readings for the week, I'm jotting down ideas for class. You know, I also will put together either a PowerPoint or sort of an outline for class, that sort of thing. But I'm also somebody who likes to stay really kind of flexible with my teaching approach. You know, like Kristen said, every single class is different. And that's true from like your 9:30 quiz section to your 10:30 quiz section. Even though they're in the exact same class, it will be such a different mix of personalities. So I try to stay really kind of flexible with the schedule that I lay out. But you know, it is important to prep for class. You should always have like a plan going in and like a good sense of like what you're going to cover. But know that like your weekly allotted time might vary with your own demands. And as Jose said, like keep track of the hours. Just, you know, sort of keep yourself honest with the number of hours you're spending on teaching, because I think that's really important too.
All right, thanks everyone. These are great questions, and we have more coming in, so I'm just going to keep moving us through them. What was your first day of TAing like is the next highest voted question. So some of you mentioned this a little bit, but if you want to just briefly share maybe a little bit about what your first day was like, and what maybe relatedly, what advice you have for folks as they're thinking about and planning their first day.
My first day of TAing looks like I don't know if you all know, the fisheries building is actually not on the main part of UW Seattle campus. This is off towards the Montlake Cut, near by the water. So for me, I never go to the main Seattle campus, so I go early to find my classroom because every building is laid out differently. So it's a little bit of just like self-care for myself. Okay, I'm going to go to class 20 minutes earlier than I probably will every other time, just to find this darn place and give me that comfort. Find where the bathroom is, find where the water bottle filler is, because you're probably going to have a 10-minute break at some point during your section, and you're going to probably go through all that water because we don't know if that room is super heated or not, so you might just be sweating. That leads me to my next point. I was so sweaty, so nervous, even though I had taught before at high school, which I still think was the scariest time. But even when I came to UW, my first day of teaching there, you don't know who's going to be in there, and you want to do a good job. It's important. There's so many stakes. But giving yourself that time to get there, have a buddy walk with you, like whatever system works for you. And honestly, the students are probably a little nervous too. It might be their like one of their first week of classes ever at UW. This might be a topic that they really care about, but they're super nervous that they might not be good at it. So just try to remember you're not alone. And the students are there to learn, and they want to work with you to get through this challenging time.
I can go. I will take that to a different context. The first time that I taught a class as a faculty here. I did both my PhD and postdoc in purely research institutions. So I don't have, I lied earlier when I TA 500 years ago. I never TA by the time that I became a teaching faculty. The first day that I taught a class was awful. It was really, really awful. And the second and the third and the fourth and the fifth. And it takes time. And I'm a teaching faculty, right? So I've been just promoted to associate. So I made it through. I guess my two advice, first one is be kind to yourself. That is very, very important. And second, we are going to fail for sure. And I did, and I keep failing. And it doesn't matter. Actually, it's very important to fail. But what is really was key for me was to reflect afterwards. Once you fail, just swallow your pride and think for 10 minutes what worked and what didn't work, right? You don't have to write a paragraph. You don't have to, you just really think things that work, things that didn't work, and take that applying to the next class and the next class. And there will be a point where you feel that you're not failing anymore, right? But it takes time and it takes reflection really on where you're doing and kindness, truly. And that can apply really to professors, TA, or anyone in whatever position where they are learning the ropes and the levers.
One other thing I will add on like reflecting, one thing that's been helpful for me is if you reflect with like a fellow TA that's teaching the same course, you can talk about like, how did that activity go for you? And maybe you both had a horrible time and it was actually the activity that you were both teaching and not either of you. And it can be really validating to have that conversation with another TA and get their experience on it. So if you are teaching with other teaching assistants, it's great to ask them how it went and reflect and have that conversation with them. Because they're doing the exact same thing as you. And so they might be able to offer advice that's actually usable for that class or that material. And so it's kind of a more lower stakes way to reflect with like a peer or a friend, and you can kind of laugh about it and have that opportunity to get some feedback from someone who's doing something similar. My first day did not go well either, I'll be honest, but it's been uphill. Like you don't want to start off really great, right? So if you start off pretty low, then you just really, the students are so impressed with you by the end of the quarter that like they're really proud of you as well for growing. So I was definitely very honest with students on my first day that I was like, this is my first day ever teaching, but I'm really excited and I'm excited to grow with you. And I think they were really proud of me by the end as well. And so, yeah, it's okay. It's going to always be better, I think. So after the first day.
All right, thanks. We have a couple of good questions about engagement. So our next one up is, how do you work to engage students in a class, particularly if the class is widely taken as a gen ed? So if students are maybe there more for a requirement than that they want to be. But in general, how do you work to engage students in a class? Good question.
I can start off with this one. So I generally like to be involved in classes that I personally enjoyed and liked. So even if they're gen eds, I personally connect with that material. And I think it's okay to be like kind of geeky about it. Like if it's intro programming, I'll be like, whoa, isn't this crazy? Like we just wrote a program that like prints out some characters, but like look at that, it works. Or like I love being involved in like intro math courses for the CS department. So the first time we write a proof, I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like there are an infinite number of things that we just proved this statement on, like over an infinite amount. And I mean, often students don't think it's unbelievable or as cool as necessarily I do, but I think it's one way to engage people is to show your excitement about that topic and to bring that excitement and energy to whatever it is. I've had amazing instructors for gen eds where I wasn't interested in that topic at all, but they were so interested in it that it compels you to be engaged and interested, even if it is just for that 1 hour or that one quarter. I'll still, remember the way that they were passionate about the material. So I think bringing your energy can make a lot of difference.
I completely agree. I was going to say basically the exact same thing. Enthusiasm is contagious, right? So like you can always find something that you are excited about. And if you sort of like bring that energy to class, students are going to pick up on that and they will be more engaged with the content.
My recommendation is I try to never talk like full on main character monologue for more than 20 to 25 minutes. Even if you are required to do a lot of talking to get them through the section that you're in charge of, I always force myself to wrap it up by 25 minutes at the maximum. And there are different approaches to what to do at that 25-minute mark. If your time crunch is really tight and your teaching team needs you to get through the stuff, one, it's going to be okay. But two, you can do something short like show a funny picture of an animal or a cute animal. Just give people a brain break to be like, and stop and breathe. Here's the next section kind of deal. If you're using it for the R programming labs at the 25-minute mark, that's when we would do an exercise, whether it be a quick polling exercise or here's a question, try to code it up yourself and we'll go over the answer in 5 to 10 minutes, depending on what your schedule is like. So for engagement, give them a break for their brain to just sort of take a deep breath and sigh.
Yeah, I can go real quick. I absolutely agree with what I'm hearing. Changing the format is very important. Change lecture, ask them to talk, use poll everywhere, ask them to stand up and walk around and then sit back. And I think it's very important, especially when we teach these foundational courses, introduction to physics, maths, biology, they're pretty dry sometimes. Create a context for what they're learning is important. And one trick that I learned a few years ago from a great professor, Marie Pat Wendroth, she always said, to keep them engaged, you have to make them fail. You have to trick them, but no huge fails, just small fails. So you have to create like a challenging environment and challenging questions for them to feel like they're so close to the answer, but maybe they are not quite there. And when you tell them what the right answer is, they are like, oh, damn it, I knew it. I knew exactly what it was. But you keep them like that high energy. And I agree with Ryan. I mean, enthusiasm is contagious. And we've been all victims of boring seminars and boring classes and just a killing environments. Just keep things up, high energy, interact, make them talk, make them think, treat them, make them fail, and keep the environment pretty light and fun.
Thank you, Jose. Well, we are at getting to the time where we are going to wrap up. So what we're going to do now is give each of our panelists just a couple minutes to do some closing remarks, and then we will move on to the rest of our session. I just want to say these are all really good questions, and for the questions that we didn't get to answer today, we're going to we'll share with you resources where you can find answers to these questions. And so I will turn it over to Anjali.
Thanks, Katie. These were great questions. I really enjoyed just like talking through some of my thoughts with you all. One thing I'll say is when I go to panels and specifically about teaching, sometimes I get stressed out by how many perspectives there are and how much advice there is. And so if you heard a lot of things and you're overwhelmed, that's super normal. I think if you can just take one or two things even that you found the most helpful and just carry those through to your first class, for example, that makes this whole panel worth it. So, you know, like it's totally normal to be overwhelmed by all of the advice. And we've all been in that position before. It was super fun talking with you all. Hopefully this was helpful. I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Yeah, in thinking about stepping into the classroom on your very first day, I encourage you to actually like map out, think through, and practice your like intro. The first like 30 seconds, 2 minutes where you're sort of like, hey, I'm Ryan, like here's what I'm doing up in the front of the classroom. Here's why I'm excited to be here. You can think about that as sort of like, you know, telling them your credentials, though don't make it sort of like too stuffy, but sort of like, you know, explaining to students who you are and why you're standing up in front of the class. And I think that's really helpful to kind of set the tone. And if you just like take a few minutes to think through that and like run through it in front of the mirror, in front of your friend, in front of your cat, whatever it is, to like just get yourself sort of practice with that like first little intro, I think that can be really helpful for kind of setting the tone. And the other thing I will say is don't take yourself too seriously. Like, you know, yes, practice that intro, but if you mess up and say the wrong thing, like laugh it off. Studies have actually shown that students respond better to teachers that they find relatable, who sort of make mistakes on occasion, because it sort of humanizes you. And so, you know, don't worry about making like little mistakes here and there. And as you know, Anjali said at the beginning, and Jose touched on as well, like, teaching is a skill and it will get better and you will get better at it.
Absolutely. That makes complete sense to me. I want to share with you the first time the professor's name is Mark Sherrill in the School of Fisheries, and he started the class. It was a statistics class, so I was sweaty. There's a theme in my life of being in the classroom. And he said to me, I'm going to be teaching this class to you, and I want you to know that I'm going to fail. I'm going to fail a lot, and I'm going to do it often and be transparent with you about why these mini failures didn't work and what I'm going to do to be better about it. Now, you need to touch base with the teaching persona and like the authentic self for how you communicate that. That worked well for Mark because he has or the way that Mark phrased it matched him as a person, at least who he is in the classroom. So, you know, you want to model the learning for students. And Jose mentioned this as well. Just remember, we as humans tend to learn when we're struggling with something, if we're playing with it. Some people are tactile like that. There's all sorts of different ways people learn. And so being authentic and saying, I'm learning as a teacher every year and will continue to learn until the day I stop teaching. And so I want to role model to you in my teaching, my learning. And I hope that it helps keep you going in your learning for insert class name here. And I think it was just one little tidbit I throw out at you for your wish list of things to practice over and over for each round is practice asking leading questions. At first, building that authority and trust, you want to be like, I know the answer, here it is, bang. But like Jose had hinted, you know the answer, ask them questions to get them there themselves. It is not a natural ability for me. That's something that I practice and I've still wished that I was better at to this day. So put that on your dream wish list. Madeline, what do you think?
what I'll leave you guys with is I remember like, what did I love about TAs when I was an undergrad? And like, it was definitely not like all of the information they taught me, right? Like that was not why I was like, oh, I love the TAs. Oh, I learned so much from all the TAs. No, it was like because they were just relatable and they were like cool. And like the way they taught, they explained something slightly different and that just made it easier. And like the discussion sections were fun and like they had a fun energy. And I think like remembering that when I teach, where it's like, yes, you are there to teach, but you're also there to be like a role model and like a mentor and more generally just like a resource for them on their journey through this class. And so there's a lot you can do to really positively affect them. But like I also think about just like being there, being relatable, being a resource is a lot of what you're doing. And it's a lot less about, oh, I'm really strict teaching this material. You're really there to be them. And I remember this year I went to the biology department graduation and I like recognized more than 50 names of students graduating that I had taught. And that was just like an amazing experience. I have gotten so much more from the students than I ever thought I would. And like teaching has been more, I've learned so much and I've gained so much from it that I almost am like, it's not even about what they're learning because I'm gaining so much from it. So I'm really excited for you guys and I hope you all have amazing journeys. All right, Jose.
Oh, thank you. Well, man, it sucks being the last one because now the good ideas have been already out there. Okay, I guess 3 core ideas. You are not alone. You don't have to solve all the problems. Check with the rest of the TAs in your team. Check with your instructor. Keep clean that communication channel with them. Number 1. Number 2, really be kind to yourself. It takes years of practice to be an effective instructor. And the only moment that you stop learning is the time that you retire from teaching. It's just a continuing learning experience. And the third one, which is a little more practical, we all have in our departments like a very efficient instructors, very seasoned TAs, maybe with teaching awards. Go and observe how they do their work. Go and observe their classes, how they teach the lab sessions, and take one idea at a time. Go there, see something that catches your eye, and you're, oh my God, they're using Paul everywhere, or they're using this random discussion leader, or just take notes and just start this little implementation strategy one step at a time. And that takes me back to one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning. If you folks are seeing yourself getting into academia and sometime in the short term, start getting your gears turned into what does a teaching philosophy look like, what's DEI statement look like, and start including all those little things that you learn, that you're implementing, that you're learning as a TAs, and that'll make your work way easier down the road.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you, Anjali, Madeline, Kristen, Ryan. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists who shared so much fantastic advice. Feel free to do applause, write your thanks in chat. And at this point, then we want to give our panelists a chance to sign off, to say goodbye. Thank you all. Okay, now we want to give you a chance to talk a little bit with each other about some of the things that you've heard, give you a chance to connect with each other in breakout rooms. So we're going to put you in breakout rooms. After briefly introducing yourself to your group members, we would like each of you to discuss the following prompt, which Jake is going to put in chat. So based on what you heard, based on the things that the panelists shared, what are some things that you're excited to try in your own teaching your own TA work? What really resonated with you and stood out, and what questions did you have? And we're going to take about 10 minutes in breakout rooms. So we'll come back together at 10:20, and I will let Jake take it over from here.
Folks will be returning back from the breakout rooms at this time.
All right, let's just give folks a couple of seconds to get back in action. And we are going to point you to some resources in just a second that I think you will find very helpful. Okay, are we all back?
At this point, everyone should be back. Welcome back.
Okay, well, today, kind of come out of your breakout rooms. We're going to do an exercise that you can do, particularly if you're doing a Zoom session, if that's part of your experience as a TA. So what I want you to do, and you can try this in your classrooms, is I want you to start typing one thing that you're excited to try as a TA. I want you to start typing that in chat, but don't hit post yet. So let me give you like 30 seconds to type that. Don't hit post. What's one thing you're excited to try in your classroom? Okay. Okay. So when I say go, we're all going to post. All right. And this is going to be fun. It's called a waterfall. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go. Nice. Being myself, being honest, those are good things to try. Halfway breaks, so important. Connecting with students individually. Yeah, that's why we're doing this. That's why we're here. Use humor. All right, good. Provide positive reinforcement. That is so important. That's a great thing to try. Well, cool. It's wonderful to see all these reflect. That's wonderful. To see all these goals that you've set for yourself. Just to wrap up, I want to point you to some resources. And this was mentioned a couple of times by the panelists, that the idea that you never stop learning how to teach. And that's really kind of our driving vibe here at the CTL. We think that good teaching is something that's always in development. I was really struck by one of the panelists said that prep is very important. And then most of the panelists said you are going to make mistakes. And it's so important to keep that in mind. Prep is important, but so is the admission that perfection is impossible. And in fact, reflective teaching kind of is grounded in that area, right? The idea that you're always in development, you're always developing your teaching. That's part of a reflective teaching practice. And we had some questions that we didn't get to about, well, how do you do that reflection? And I just wanted to note that you're already doing it. The first part of reflecting on your teaching is just to ask questions. And we had so many great questions today. So thank you for that. Our job at the Center for Teaching and Learning is to provide opportunities for you to develop your teaching, to ask questions and seek answers, and just work together to figure out some stuff when it related to teaching. And we do this in a number of ways. One of the ways I think you'll find most valuable is through our website. And Jake's going to share our homepage, Teaching at UW. Super easy to remember how to get to that website. It's teaching.uw.edu. And this is just a font of information, and it's organized around key issues. You can see the white tabs up top are organized around topics that most instructors want to know something about. So if you click on that, it'll open up a drop-down menu, and you can see lots of different topics. And you'll notice actually in course design, Jake, if you want to, yep, down there you can see we actually have a Chat GPT page for how to begin thinking about talking with your students about Chat GPT. And so you can go to this page. I know a couple of people had some questions about Chat GPT. On this page, lots of good advice for how to kind of frame conversations with students. There's some examples down below. If you're part of your responsibilities as a TA is to develop assignments, if that's one of your responsibilities, here's some ideas for how to integrate AI into your teaching. Also on our webpage, you'll see a tab called Learn with Us, because good teachers are always learning. TAs are more than welcome to come to our workshops. And so you can see we have a workshops linked there. If you click on that link, it'll open up all the workshops we have planned for this academic year. And you can start registering right now. So I encourage you to kind of look through this list, If there's a topic that really stands out to you, or more than one topic, go ahead and register today. Get that on your calendar. In addition to the website, we have the Canvas site, which many of you have already begun looking into. This is chock full of lots of information, and if you click on that module button, you can see really key topics about inclusive teaching, how to prepare for the first day, concerns about accessibility, how to make your teaching more accessible, active learning. We have some questions about engagement, getting students to be active agents in the learning process. So I really encourage you to, if you haven't been in the Canvas site, spend some time in there. You're going to have access to this throughout the entire academic year, but you should find that helpful. And finally, we'd like to wrap up by getting some feedback with you. Just as good teaching requires a growth mindset, a mindset that we are always growing in our practice, the Center for Teaching and Learning is always growing in its practice. And one of the ways you can help us grow is to provide us feedback with how this program went for you. Jake is going to put a link to the feedback form. It's also in this Canvas site in the chat. Please take a minute to fill it out, and we really find that helpful. And that concludes this year's program. Thank you, everyone. We wish you the best in your time at UW and as a TA. Bye now.